Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this bonus episode of In the Pits. Over the weekend, a lot of discussion and tension came out surrounding a marker that was seen in the background of a video on the Instagram story of a prominent figure in our community. The marker, which I have pictured here, features multiple hate symbols lasered into the marker and into the tank, as well as stickers on the loader. Tonight's show is going to have a specific focus to state in plain English what exactly these symbols mean and promote, to ask the question of what does this community want to not just allow, but promote and spotlight, and to give my personal opinions on the matter. This show is not going to go after anybody by name, but instead going to bring light to what exactly these belief systems include without softening the language, without sugarcoating or dancing around anything. Emphasize why symbols and beliefs like this are a big deal and why I believe we need to remove those in our community that not just hold but openly profess these beliefs. We're going to start with the sticker that is most visible on the side of the loader, which are the SS bolts. Originally, the SS were multiple subdivisions of groups that swore allegiance directly to Adolf Hitler, not to the government, but directly to their leader. And some of their duties included operating concentration and death camps, neutralizing free speech and any opposition to Nazi ideology, and operating mass surveillance on the German people. To be clear, this group, the SS, was directly responsible for the murder of millions of victims. And I'll go through more specific categories here. 6 million Jews, 4.5 million Soviets, 3.3 million Soviet prisoners of war, 1.8 million Polish, over 300,000 Serbians, 270,000 disabled, 80,000 Freemasons, and thousands of others that were deemed undesirable, which totaled an estimated 17 million lives. They also strictly enforced military rule, ousted political opponents, took down clergy and religious organizations, and made anyone who spoke out against them disappear overnight. Today, this symbol is widely used to represent white supremacy. Now I ask you, is this ideology something you want your community to be associated with? Next, I would like to look at the skull, which is seen here on the tank, which this symbol is called Death's Head, or in German, the Totenkopf. This symbol became the symbol for the guards and operators of the several concentration and death camps, and later was the symbol for the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf, which was known for committing numerous war crimes during the war. Just a few here, such as singling out and executing black prisoners of war from the French army in the Chasselet massacre. Make no mistake, Jews were not the only group targeted by these people. Is this symbol, one with a long history of crimes against humanity and mass murder, one you want your community to be associated with? Next here on top center of the hopper, we have the Celtic cross. Now, the cross is a common symbol for many communities out there. Christians, Irish pride, a bunch of other cultures, and usually by itself, the Celtic cross does not symbolize hate. However, those uses normally have a longer vertical axis extending downward. This version here that you see was originally referred to as the Sun Cross or the Wheel Cross, and was commonly used as a symbol for the Nazis. Today, several white supremacist groups, such as the KKK and Stormfront, which is the longest operating white supremacist website online, and also places the words white pride worldwide surrounding this cross. Now I ask you, community, does this symbol of white supremacy represent you? Up next on the back of the tank, and on you can see it partially here on the back of the loader, is the sun wheel, or in German, the Sonnenrad. And like the Celtic cross, the idea of the sun wheel or the black sun, the symbols appear in many cultures, and again, on its own, doesn't necessarily represent Nazi ideals. However, more recently in human history, this symbol has been commandeered by neo-Nazi and far-right groups, including by the mass shooter behind the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand in 2019, which ended in 51 killed and another 89 injured. I ask you, does this rallying symbol of neo-Nazis and mass murderers represent your tribe too? The last symbol of the marker that I want to talk about is on the feed neck. And here we go. This here is the Nazi war eagle, which is depicted clutching a swastika. This originally was developed by the Nazi Party, a party whose leader regularly tops the charts as the most evil human being to ever exist in human history. Their leader was also one of the biggest losers in history. He was a soldier during the First World War, so he lost 2 world wars. He was directly responsible for somewhere between 70 to 85 million deaths worldwide. He inspired the majority of the planet to team up and come kick his ass. And he was so cowardly, he decided to take his own life rather than face the consequences of what he had done. Does that sound like the kind of legacy that you want to be associated with? At this point, I want to bring up all of the groups historically targeted by this ideology. Not just the Jewish people. You also had Poles, Black people, gay or bisexual men, Romani people, which the old term you might know as gypsies, civilians that disobeyed or resisted the Nazi Party rule, prisoners of war, any political opposition, and people with disabilities. If any of those categories sound like someone that might be you or might be close to you or you might be related to, guess what? These ideologies would affect you today. The race laws enacted by this hateful group forbade certain marriages. It limited citizenship to either full or 7/8 German, which meant if 3 of your grandparents were not full German, it applies to you. You were not a citizen. And violators of any of the limitations imposed on these races faced prison and hard labor sentences. As I mentioned before, political opponents and those that spoke out against the government vanished overnight, which is quite the opposite of the free speech that we all enjoy today in the United States. Even without proof, even mere suspicion of violating any of these statutes was often enough to be punished with no rights, no trial, no jury. Straight to your sentence. Take a second to reflect on if this kind of society would be one you want to live in. And don't just assume that you wouldn't be affected because you aren't Jewish. The rights that we enjoy today, freedom of speech, freedom of protest, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom against unreasonable search and seizure, your right to a fair trial and due process of law, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, your right to vote, your birthright citizenship, the popular election of senators, women's right to vote. All of these things that we enjoy today would not exist if these ideologies were to become reality. Now, why is it important that society diligently snuffs out these beliefs when they surface? You may have heard of something called the paradox of tolerance. It's a well-known philosophical concept that covers exactly this. Tolerating intolerance leads to the spread of those intolerant ideals and eventually to the demise of the group. This ideology should not be given the opportunity to feel welcome or given any sort of platform at any point in our community. Whether you think it affects you or not because of your beliefs, your race, your background, I assure you it does. Now, here are some common arguments that you might have seen online. But what about freedom of speech to express these ideas? Just because you don't agree with them doesn't mean others shouldn't be able to express them. Well, freedom of speech applies specifically to limit the government's ability to go after citizens based on speech. Us as a community, we have the ability to oust those that we do not want to associate with. You as an individual are not a government entity, and choosing what to allow or not allow around you does not mean that you violated someone else's rights. They are simply experiencing the social consequences that come with their views. Another common counter argument that I've heard online. What about child molesters and the pedophiles in our sport? Why aren't you saying anything about them? I would say think back to what the community did do. We did work to expel these people. Case in point, look at the article originally in issue 2 of the Great American Paintball magazine. There were 2 pages towards the front of the magazine, completely black as the background, titled Predators, in bold white text, naming multiple individuals with an alleged history of it in our sport as a prime example. Just like then, today we must work to keep these individuals out as well. And make no mistake, it is work, and it does require action. Another argument. Why don't you just mind your business? It's a guy in his private residence with something in his private collection. He's not hurting anybody. Well, aside from the points I've already made, we must be careful not to allow this to become associated with our sport or our community. Regardless of the amount of popularity, the amount of social media presence, or the amount of money that might come along with it. Once that association is made, it is there to stay. Even long after the money, the popularity, the social media followers disappear. And it is not an association that I want to be in the same breath as my name or as my community's name. Another common question that I see online, another common counter argument. Does that mean you think they should be banned just because they believe something different than you? I want to be crystal clear what these beliefs involve. They call for the destruction of our great society and the eradication of large numbers of individuals based purely on their bloodline, rather than the content of their character or their contributions to the betterment of those around them. Now, as far as calling for bans, whether events or leagues want to implement bans is really up to the owners and the type of environment that they want to allow and they want to create at their events. However, they must understand that if their events are an environment where these ideas are allowed to exist and are seen as a safe haven, then the community will look to move elsewhere. To close out my thoughts on this, I want to emphasize once again that things like this require action. Understand the true implications behind these symbols and ideologies and how much of a big deal they really are. Take a moment to consider if you're okay with allowing these concepts to grow within our community. If you yourself are someone that holds these ideals, consider this. Would you still feel the same way if your bloodline or your race or maybe the bloodline or race, or background of those close to you were on the receiving end of a world where your conditions that you believe in or profess were allowed to exist, would you still feel the same way? To close out this evening, I do want to thank my show sponsors. Before recording this, I reached out to them, informed them of this message, and gave them all an opportunity if they wanted to sit out, if they wanted to not have their brand or their name associated with this. I completely understood wanting to sit out of this fight. I gave them that option. And I am proud to say that not one of them backed out. Every single one of them stood by this message and our shared values. Thank you. Get That Shot, Paintball Kumite, BEMRAPs, Hydra and XTPL Events, Mariachi Aguilas de Oro, 71 Designs, TexanHemp.com, QBR Official, San Antonio 3v3 Paintball Series, and Splat Houston. I want to thank you all for listening. And I want to thank you, the listener, for standing up for the kind of community that we all want to be proud of.